Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. This time we're talking about the 5 strongest leaders of all time. So obviously Dragon Ball Super is at a bit of a dead zone right now. There's not any real new events happening. We just got Draft Box 5, but there's nowhere really to play with it. So I figured this would be a good time to interject some kind of historical and I guess recuperative content where we can talk about the game over its lifespan, get a little bit of knowledge about that, and then we can move forward once this stuff all kind of clears up. So that being said, guys, I'm gonna forego the kind of paywall shameless plugs. I know we're all hurting right now. I know everyone's trying to be a little more conservative in terms of, like, you know, their funds and resources. So I just want to say, guys, if you like the channel, if I've ever made a video that you liked, just consider subscribing, like the video, maybe share a video with a friend. That's a very free way you guys can help me out and keep bringing you this content. And I know we're all going through it, so I just want to say best of luck to everyone out there. Hopefully you guys can still enjoy the content. With that being said, we're gonna get right into this video. So this is gonna be a 5 numbered list going down from order of weakest to strongest. And I think this number 5 spot is probably the most flexible, but I'm going with Shenron, the OG Dragon Ball leader, Miraculous Arrival Shenron. So on his unawakened side, he cannot attack. You switch the card to rest mode once per turn, activate main. You can search 2 Dragon Balls from your deck and or life, add them to your hand. If you guys don't know, because actually Wish Leaders have been out of the format for a little bit of time now. If you guys don't know, the majority of Dragon Balls you play, just say send them to the drop area, draw 1 card. So very, very powerful in terms of deck thinning. Now, when this leader came out, was right around the same time that Gogeta Hero Revive came out, and it was a pretty big scare in the community. Now that was set 5, so 4 main sets ago and several side sets ago, this card came out, and people were very, very scared of this card because for 5 energy, you got a triple strike, barrier, deflect. So there was no real way to interact with this card. Auto sparking 10 when you play this card if you have 5 or more energy, which Shenron could easily ramp to with objection. This deck got a lot of cards banned, which we'll talk about in just a second, but you choose 1 card in your life and place in the drop area. Then your opponent shuffles all the cards in their hand back into the deck and then draws 3 cards. So right around the time these cards both came out, Storm was the most powerful deck in the format. I don't really think that's very debatable, but this deck was still very scary because it meant that anything that was slower than turn 4 pretty much automatically lost. Now you got to keep in mind that this is before things like Chomp the Trickster came out. The first real answer to a card like this was Mutaito's Skill of a Sage, which came out in the World Tournament Power Booster. That was the first real answer we got to a card like Gogeta 7, but you still got reset to 3 cards in hand. You still got a randomized hand. So if you couldn't win on that following turn, you were going to be in for a really big problem. Now, this deck didn't really dominate that format because, again, Storm was the most powerful deck in the format. Shenron actually didn't win many events, but it did terrorize many of the formats it was a part of. One of the main ones was this last year's Nationals. Now, just from personal experience, I mean, I played against, I think it was 5 or 6 Shenrons in a row at Nats, and it was very, very not fun. But this deck did end up going to the finals up against Broly BR, which, spoiler alert, is on this list. And this deck ended up just wreaking havoc that whole format. That was the format of Shenron ramp. So not only were people dropping Gogeta Hero Revived, they were actually ramping to 7 energy with many different cards like Objection, Whis Wrestling Attendant, and a few other cards. They were ramping up so that you could activate World Peace, which is a desire card, lets you revive any battle card as long as you have the appropriate energy to normally play it. So you would play Gogeta Hero Revived, and you would play Kaioken Son Goku Defender of Earth. If you guys don't know what this card does, deflect, energy exhaust, permanent. If there are 20 or more red or green cards in your drop area, reduce energy cost of this card in your hand by 2. So this is the majority of way that decks play this card. It's typically played in red-green decks, and that was pretty much what it was intended to be played in. But with the ramp ability of Shenron and the genericness of World Peace, they were able to get 7 energy by like turn 4, turn 5, and then they were able to use the more important effects, which are the auto. When your life reaches 1 for the duration of the turn, this card gains triple strike and dual attack and cannot be KO'd by your opponent's skills. Activate main, choose 1 card in your life, add it to your hand. Your opponent reveals their hand, you choose up to 1 card from it, place it in their drop area. This card gains plus 25,000 power for the duration of the turn. So you would get the dual attack, double strike, basically infinite attack power. And again, this was a scenario where if your deck was slower than turn 4, turn 5, you really couldn't beat this deck. Even if you had Chomp the Trickster to rest the Gogeta 7, you were only going to have 4 cards in hand. If you couldn't put adequate pressure on the Shenron player, they were just going to drop Kaioken on you the next turn, or quite possibly in that same turn. They would just forego their ultimate ability, which says remove 7 Dragon Balls from the drop area, give one of your battle cards triple attack. They would just forego that and drop Gogeta 7 and Kaioken Goku in the same turn. So this deck, in my opinion, hosts one of the most powerful leaders of all time. In my opinion, it's going for the number 5 slot. Next up, I want to talk about SS3 Goku. Now, I know this is a bit debatable, but I think of all the leaders we see on this list, I think personally SS3 is the weakest, at least maybe by today's standards. But this deck dominated 2 separate formats. Now, if we go, but let's see what the leader does first off, I guess. So you guys might know the rebooted SS3 leader that was based on this leader, which you guys may not have seen if you're newer to the game. So Son Goku, permanent, you can only place up to 6 energy. Activate main, place 1 card from your hand in the drop area. If you have no energy, choose 2 cards in your life and add them to your energy. So right there, you have Self Awaken, and you start turn 1 on turn 2. Now keep in mind, this is before the time of multicolor cards and multicolor energy. So your 2 energy came always in active mode. So you're really always on turn 2 at the start of the game. Awaken, when you place 4 or less, draw 2 and flip over. Heighten Evolution, Super Saiyan 3 Son Goku, permanent, you can only have 6 energy. At the end of your turn, choose up to 3 of your energy, switch them to active mode. So you'll notice that's one of the big differences with the reboot leader. The reboot leader only untaps monocolor energy. This leader untaps any color energy. So you could basically make any offensive play you wanted to, and you would know for a fact that you really couldn't get punished, because again, this was a time before counterplays were a thing. So you could just play your foreseeing hit, you could play your chain attack Zeno, and then once it goes back to your opponent's turn, you're always gonna have that 3 energy to defend with. So it was really powerful in that regard. When this card attacks, draw 1. So the first format this thing really saw super competitive success was a little bit after Mecha Frieza was dealt with, which we will talk about that leader later. But after Mecha Frieza was dealt with, this really was the default strongest leader. And this deck dominated a format. I believe it was ARG Invitational 2018, where just like over 50% of the top 32 was red, blue, SS3. And then you even had other variants of SS3 in that top cut as well. You had SS3 blue, green, and you had SS3 mono blue. This leader was just so powerful that nothing could really keep up with it. So you just had an entire top cut majority of Chain Zeno SS3, and this was back when Chain Zeno was a real problem. So Zeno the Playing God is a 15k 7 drop, which you'd really think that's too slow to ever drop in this game if you've played this game for any amount of time. But the reality is there was a card called Chantak Trunks, which was a 4 drop that you could actually drop as early as turn 2, sometimes even turn 1 in this deck, which is pretty insane. But that card lets you play any 15k from your hand. Zeno comes down, negates all the skills on the board, shuffles both players' battle cards back to the deck, and then their hands as well, and then both players draw 5. So that totally dominated the format. Then we have Bardock the Progenitor. This was the whole swap aggro deck that was known to be Storm, and this was really dominant with a leader known as Hirudegarn, which hasn't really seen too much competitive play recently. But SS3 won a ton of events with Storm as its main deck engine. So this leader just absolutely wreaked havoc on many formats, and that's why I'm giving it the number 4 slot. I'm throwing it a little lower on the list because I think in today's standards it would be a little bit weaker, but in its time it was wreaking a lot of havoc. Next up, I want to talk about Broly BR. Now, I'm pretty sure out of any leader, this leader has the most premier event wins. I'm pretty confident by that. I was scrolling through my channel and I just saw thumbnail after thumbnail. Broly. It was pretty crazy. But this leader had many dominant formats, one of which was Broly Storm. So I just talked about how SS3 and Hirudegarn Storm were a thing. Once those leaders kind of got phased out, Broly became the premier Storm leader, eventually transitioning to Broly Height of Mastery, featuring your 8-drop boy up here, Goku Ultra Instinct, 35k triple strike dual attack. When you play him with swap, you tap 3 of your opponent's cards, ignoring barrier. That also includes energy. So super powerful win condition. You can also slap Victory Strike on top of him. So you basically had win conditions for every single matchup. Fast forward a little bit, we had the dominance of Broly Universe 6. Now, Universe 6 was a really powerful aggro archetype. You were dropping really big double strikes and criticals as early as like turn 2, turn 3. And they did have their own leaders for it. But again, Broly was so generically powerful that he had the ability to restand any single battle card on your board once per turn. He could also restand himself or an energy, but a lot of the times you could restand your game finishing threats, and that was super powerful. Fast forward a bit later, going back to that same Nationals I talked about Shenron with, this leader won that Nationals with an engine called Broly Apes. So featuring your boy right here, Grade 8 Bardock Raider's Warcry. If your leader's yellow, when you combo him for 2 energy, you play him, tap one of your opponent's battle cards, and draw a card. Back then we had Zeno button, which also allowed you to untap all your blue energy, and if you had blue-yellow energy, it also did work for that as well. So that was just a super powerful, aggressive / defensive deck. It really played in all avenues of the game. Super powerful. I'm going to give Broly number 3 because he won so many events and housed a lot of really powerful strategies over the course of the game's history. Next up, we're talking about Super Shenron. Now, I think in terms of today's standards, this would probably still be one of the most powerful decks in the game if they never errated the leader. The leader, once upon a time, so it has pretty much the same front side as Shenron, original Shenron, but the backside's ulti is pretty much the only different thing. Back then, you would remove 7 Dragon Balls from your drop area, choose 20 cards from drop area, shuffle them to your deck. If you do, flip this card over at the end of the turn and take another turn after this one. This leader would eventually get errated to say 30 battle cards instead of 20 of any card. So now it's much more difficult to resolve that effect, although people are kind of exploring it now that we're getting the new deck limit size changed to 60. That's kind of funny, but this leader saw a very rapid succession in terms of its tier 0 strategies. You had at first Super Shenron Storm, which is just the mono yellow Storm engine, Bardock the Progenitor, a lot of those really aggressive swap pieces. Then you had the blue yellow aggressive version as well that I believe was created by Jordan Beard and the Canadians up there. I believe they were the first people to play it at the Chicago Celebration. So that was more of a blue-yellow aggressive variant. You were still playing a lot of your aggressive yellow cards, but you also had Preface of Recovery Son Goku, which came out off of Child's Wish. So Child's Wish is a 2 energy desire that brings out any 3-drop or less. So if you bring out either Preface of Recovery Son Goku or Explorer Bulma, which both untap 2 energy when you play them, your Child's Wish was essentially free. And this leader would go on to get Child's Wish banned and also himself errated. Fun fact. Then the most dominant version of this deck, I would say, eventually became Super Shenron Height of Mastery, which again was using the same Height of Mastery we read before. Also Son Goku the Awakened Power. This deck really had a wing edition for every single matchup because once the Height of Mastery version came around, it had the ability to go aggressive, it had the ability to win with Height of Mastery, and it had the ability to win with Victory Strike. So really it had a wing edition for every single matchup, which was pretty insane. And finally, guys, we're talking about the boy Mecha Frieza. So originally, this leader would allow you to take life to activate extra cards of 1 cost for free on the backside and of 2 costs for free on the Awakened side. This leader would very shortly later get errated to only working on the opponent's turn for most cases. But this leader was so powerful that for the San Jose Regional, one of the biggest regionals in Dragon Ball Super's history, I believe was in 2017, 500-person regional. This deck was absolutely tier 0, generally unbeatable. I mean, back then we had 4 Cold Bloodlust, which is now at 1 copy per deck. And back then, the 2 most powerful versions of this deck were Mecha Frieza Apes, which abused March of the Great Apes, abused Planet Vegeta, which you see here, abused Unwavering Solidarity Shugesh. We also had Mecha Frieza Veggies, which housed the green veggie engine of Santi Merkaba, which played for 2, would get you any Caulifla off top of the deck and play it, and then it would reduce the cost of all your Kabas and Cauliflas by 1. So you can imagine how powerful of a swarm spammy archetype this was. And again, Unwavering Solidarity Shugesh, a card that would shortly get banned after Mecha Frieza's dominance a few formats later. A super combo, when your life's 4 or less, if your leader is yellow, play any Saiyan from your hand with energy cost of 3 or less. Man, those are some fun days. But this super combo was absolutely insane. You also have Planet Vegeta, which by today's standards is a pretty average card. For 1 yellow, you get to search any Saiyan in your deck 4 or less. But back then, you played it for 0 energy with Mecha Frieza while also self-awakening, and you would be able to search this insanely broken super combo or any of those veggie pieces you needed, any apes you needed, things like that. Now, fun fact that we did have the Tournament of Power a few weeks ago, about a month ago now, where there was a no banless teams tournament and Mecha Frieza was everywhere. One of the craziest things they were doing with the deck was using Unwavering Solidarity Shugesh to bring out some really high power Saiyans, and then awakening their leader to drop multiple SS4 Son Goku Heartfelt Pleas in the same turn, because this card actually was errated so that you could only drop 1 per turn. But with the no errata, no banless tournament, people were able to drop multiple per turn. It was actually a really insane deck. And I think if this leader was at full power right now, I think it would very seriously be one of the strongest leaders in the game still. So that's why I'm going with the #1 slot. This leader's absolutely wreaked havoc on a format. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I think it was a little different, but a little fun to kind of go through the game's history, talk about some of the strongest leaders of all time. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Do you agree with my list? Would you change anything? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. Again, guys, subscribe, share the video, maybe watch an ad. It really helps out a lot, guys. I will see you all next time.